Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. As the year draws to a close, this week on the show, we are looking back at some of the biggest moments of 2025 across politics, international affairs, sports, technology, and health. But we kick off this series by talking about some of the biggest highlights from the world of entertainment and pop culture. And to do that, we are joined by the Indian Express's film critic, Shubhra Gupta. So, Shubhra, what would you say were some of the major trends as far as cinema and OTT were concerned in 2025?
So, it's really been, I think, a year of reckoning for both OTT and cinema in terms of the fact that there was hardly anything original which came out in either sector. There were like part twos and part threes, and whether it was the big ticket streaming shows. And as far as cinema in theaters was concerned, I think what the filmmakers and what cinema creators have realized that when it comes to getting people back into theaters, there are only a couple of ways you can get them in. Either you make the movies about animals and superheroes, creature features as I call them, or you get people who are heroes and people who have been heroes in the past, or cleaving towards a sense of really heightened nationalism as far as cinema is concerned. Look at both the movies that have made the maximum box office returns this year. Dhurandhar, which is still making money, which is still in theaters, which is still the film which came out in the first week of December. We're almost at the end of December and it shows no signs of slowing down. It has pushed the release of many films into next year. And I have a feeling that this is the film that people are going to be remembering 2025 for. Apart from everything else, it's going to be the year of Dhurandhar, for better or worse. And we will always also, of course, remember Chhaava, which came out earlier this year, which was Vicky Kaushal's film in which he plays the scion of Shivaji. He plays Sambhaji, and he goes up against a weak, evil Aurangzeb. And the interesting thing is that the common factor between these two films is that Akshay Khanna played Aurangzeb, the villain in that one, and he plays Rehman Dakat, the villain in this one. That one, he's shown to be a weak guy who's smaller than Sambhaji. Here, he's shown to be more charismatic and more sort of powerful than the spy who's going in. So interesting contradictions and interesting commonalities between both the films that have really, I think, got the maximum returns on the box office this year.
Right. And Shubhra, like you mentioned, 2025 will forever be remembered as the year of Dhurandhar. The film is on its way to break all box office records. Tell us about your thoughts on the film and the kind of recognition that it is getting.
So the interesting thing about Dhurandhar is that it makes no bones about the fact that it's set in Pakistan. It is about Muslims who are treacherous, who are violent, who are ultra-violent, in fact. The violence in the film is extremely disturbing. And the whole film is actually set in an outpost of Karachi called Layari. There's hardly any portion of the film that is set in India, except for very specific choices that the filmmaker makes. The interesting thing about, like I said, about Dhurandhar is that it makes no bones about the fact that it is jingoistic, that it is nationalistic, that it is going for the jugular in very many ways. And it's also very interesting in the fact that the film uses music and a kind of language which is very syncretic. So that's why I think the audience is completely swayed by this film, which is technically, I think, really superior. It has the kind of action that Hollywood films routinely manage to do, but no Indian film has really sort of got the kind of pace and the zing that a lot of the action sequences in Dhurandhar manages. So this is a film that is deeply conflicting to me. And I imagine it is very conflicting to many, many people who are saying, yes, it is this, but it is also this. So we will go and watch it. And yes, of course, I will watch the sequel that is going to be up in March. That's part of my job. But even if it weren't, I would probably want to know what happens to the spy who's caused, I think, 1,000 memes, more than 1,000 million memes. across the border.
Yes.
And just
Yes.
having so much fun with those a day in the life
Yes.
of a spy in Pakistan and in India. They're doing it in the other way around too. So when I wrote about it, I felt that it was this kind of outcome which no one expected. None of the creators were even thinking that it would lead to this flux of memes on the internet. I think it's still viral. I think anyone who's got hashtag Durandar or hashtag Panla or hashtag Flipperachi is
Yes.
just like
Yes.
exploding. So yeah. So the film, if you really want to sort of collapse it into one line, to me, it is propulsive and it is repulsive at the same time.
Talking about the memes and the conversations around the film, a lot of people online have been comparing and talking about the differences between Dhurandhar and films like Tiger and Pathan, which were, of course, also spy thrillers. So, how do you see those differences or those parallels?
So, as far as Pathan is concerned, or even let's say the war films or Tiger Zinda Hai or the Tiger, the franchise, it very clearly lies in a more sunny aspect. It's in sort of in a lighter vein. Yes, Pakistan is still the bad guy. I mean, it's the villain, and all of those guys are really bad guys. And only the patriotic Indians are the heroes for sure. But I think none of those films have the kind of darkness that Dhurandhar has. And none of them have melded fact and fiction in the way that Dhurandhar has. And I think that truly is the thing that separates Dhurandhar from any of those other films because they're pure fiction. I mean, they may have used a few instances of real life or incidents, but here what's happened is that actually, it's taken real sequences from things that have happened in the past, like the Kandahar, the hijack, the parliament attack, the 26/11, the kind of thing that happened in Mumbai. And they inserted it in this so that for people who may not be able to make out the distinction, it could be part of the flow. It could be like, hey, those guys are having a watch party and they're laughing when people in our country were dying, which is the problem with the film. I think it really sort of tells you the intention of the filmmaker is not only about creating this kind of canvas, but it's also blurring the line between fact and fiction. So there is that. And I think that is deliberate, and that's where the problem lies.
And Shubhra, you mentioned sequels earlier. This was also the year when we saw Sitare Zameen Par and Metro in the Know, which were sequels to Tare Zameen Par and Life in a Metro. Two films that were really loved by the audience. What do you think? Could the sequels emulate a similar impact or response?
So I will tell you a little secret about sequels. I think sequels are by definition, they come second. They come after the first one. So the first one has already done all the hard work, has already laid the ground, has already grabbed the audience's heart. So unless the second one, unless the thing, it's always going to be a follow-up. Unless the follow-up is as strong or as engaging as the original, it's always going to do the hard work. So as far as both these films are concerned, I think Life in a Metro is almost 18 years, which is almost 2 decades back when the media landscape was completely different. Films didn't have to fight against streaming. Films didn't have to fight against any other. They were just the films that people went to because there was hardly any other option. That's equally true for Tare Zameen Par because in that one, it was one of the first films in Bollywood that put the disability front and center. There had been, I think, Black either before or very close to that one. But as far as Tare Zameen Par was concerned, it had a very big star. It had Amir Khan fronting it. It had Amir Khan taking a back seat. He only comes in the second half of the film, though he is the savior figure. But the little boy with dyslexia, it's right in front. And I think what happened with that film was it opened the doors to creating conversations around disability that really we hadn't heard before. Black did it with Rani Mukherjee's character, and Tare Zameen Par did it with Darshil Sapari's character. So I think the people started to talk about this as problems or things that people lived with. And here, what happens with Sitare Zameen Par, it's a remake of a Spanish film. First of all, it's Champions, it's called. I haven't seen the original. And Amir is again part of the film, and he's the one who plays a fairly dislikable character. But once he gets to know these young people with cerebral palsy, who are people, you can't see disability, you can see people with characteristics, with motivations, with people who are thinking about things. I really liked the film because, for whatever it was worth, I think it was again looking at people with challenges as people, as human beings, and not just these people who are supposed to be bicharas. And as far as the other one is concerned, Metro. And Life in a Metro came at a time when Preetham and his band were really like USPs of that film. Here, I thought they were overplayed a bit. But again, because this whole year has been a whole year where you've had these ultra loud, ultra nationalistic, ultra hyper masculine films crowding our canvas, I think because it took us away from that zone, it took us into a zone where it's about people, it's about connections, it's about the things that Hindi cinema is losing sight of. So again, that was a film that I really liked.
Also, one of the things that you've written about is that in 2025, the angry young lover made a comeback. Although one would expect that after films like Kabir Singh and Animal, the trope would be retired. But we did see people raving about Sayara.
That's the question that has been sitting in my head, in fact, for a large part of the year, specifically when I watched Sayara and I saw the completely, to me, hysterical reaction of all the Gen Z and maybe some alphas in there who were actually crying and getting completely overwhelmed by this film and, all of that stuff. And I was thinking, Sanjay Dutt did this thing in Rocky like some 4 decades back, right? He was this guy with, completely, spoiled, entitled, anger management issues, everything, all of this. This has been, as you said, it has been part of the Hindi film firmament for a long time. But in the last few years, with the rise of wokeness, let's say, and I'm using wokeness without the ironical attachment to it, actually the right kind of woke, where people were talking about green flags, without again putting quote marks around it. We're talking about men who were in touch with their feminine side without being laughed at about, to bring them back into play the way that Kabir Singh did, the way that Arjun Reddy, the original, did, and now Sayara. It's like what you're doing here is you are tapping into a kind of insecurity that young men have around, how they appear to the other, how they appear in their dating lives, in their romantic kind of attachments that they are hoping to make. So if you're going to give people these kinds of role models, my worry is that it's now part of the mix. Hey, I can be responsible. Like I can go into a newspaper office, I can bash up somebody and I will get no pushback. Nobody telling me that you didn't do the right thing. The girl who falls in love with me is looking at me as if I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And so the other thing, apart from the fact that there is a problem with creating young men who have no responsibility for their own actions, the thing is that you don't then allow the young man to grow. You don't allow them to change. You don't give them that arc. And the person who's responsible for that, bringing about that change, becomes the heroine. It becomes their job to prop up this guy. This is literally taking me back to the dark ages. It's taking me back to the kind of regressive characters that we've always written about against in that sense. And we've always responded to saying, no, young men need to take charge. They need to take charge of their own lives. They need to be standing up and being counted. Where is this happening right now? It's the Ranjana, the Dhanush film.
Tere Ishq Mein.
That's right, that one. Same thing. He walks in and he starts burning up the place because he's madly in love. Therefore, it's
justified.
In and of itself, it becomes the thing for the young woman to actually just fall at his feet and say, oh, yeah, you're in love with me. So therefore, I need to be consequentially in love with you. How does that compute?
And in contrast to the angry young lover trope, we also saw films that pushed back against this narrative, right? A film like The Girlfriend, for instance, explored consequences of being in a relationship with an angry young lover, something that we talked about. So, what significance do such films hold, especially at a time when movies like Tere Ishq Mein and Sayara are also finding an audience?
I would say that they are completely essential to the conversation around gender and gender divides in terms of cinematic representations, because these are truly what should be in play more than anything else, because it is a conversation that is continuing and it needs as much nuance and as much push from all stakeholders, including creators, including people who call themselves influencers. It should be the thing that all of us are now talking about more than ever before. So something like a Rahul Ravindran's Girlfriend, which has Rashmika Mandana play the central character, which I thought was an interesting casting choice, because she's been playing second fiddle to all these big heroes in all the really big alpha male kind of movies, that to have her front a story which is about the girlfriend and not the boyfriend, which I think makes a difference, because here she plays a docile, submissive young woman who comes to a Hyderabad college, and then she is completely bowled over by this charismatic young man who thinks that just because he's fallen in love with her, everybody else has to fall in line, including the girlfriend. So that's how it goes. And then the pushback happens. And that is really, truly the film. And I thought that was one of the most important films of this year for me. The fact that it comes from the Telugu industry, the one that gave us Arjun Reddy a few years ago. Yeah. So this is again something important. Then I really enjoyed also Varsha Bharat's The Bad Girl. To call the character a bad girl is something that is so instinctive for people who say, for young women who voice their opinion, who are upfront about the fact that physical intimacy is something that is for men and women. Oh my God, that's really bad, huh? The film actually mirrors what happens in society. And it's a Tamil film. It's set and it takes its cues from the area that the girl is from. But it could be about a girl anywhere in this country or anywhere in Southeast Asia.
The narrative remains the same, basically.
Narrative remains the same. Then, of course, there was Loka, who's the female superhero, does it with so much panache. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And a very unusual film called So From So. It is set in a village. It's about a young man who falls in love or has a crush on this girl. And that something in what he does, sort of creates a whole furore in the village, which leads the conversation into what men can do, what women can do, and desire, about how female desire is something to be shuttered. And this film brings it out in a in a very interesting way. I think it's one of the surprise hits that came out in the Kannada film. So again, no one expected this film to become the kind of hit that it did. So again, very interesting.
And Shubhra, now coming to something that has become the highlight for 2025 for Indian cinema, which is Homebound, featuring Ishan Khattar, Vishal Jetwa and Janhvi Kapoor, produced by Dharma, a film that has now become India's official entry for the Oscars. So, do films like these give you hope that Indian cinema is headed in the right direction?
Your question is sort of answers itself in some ways, because when you are talking about Homebound as the film that has been chosen to represent India at the Oscars, and it has got into the last 15, which is about only the fifth Indian film to have, to got to that point. It's a great step. I think that the fact that Dharma produced it is also fabulous. The fact that it was from a production house which is known for the kind of mainstream, the big budget commercial films that they do, to pick up a subject like this makes me happy. But it also makes you wonder about the kind of the play that it got in theaters was not as much as it should have, in my opinion. I think a lot of people expected this film to have more sort of longer legs than it did in the theaters. But a film like this will always come up against a big budget film. And the change that needs to come really is like a conversation between exhibitors and producers and the filmmakers, and saying, look, this is a film which doesn't have the big stars, but it has a great story. It is the film that we should be pushing. And Homebound at least got a few weeks. There were great films this year with Sabar Bonda, which is a Marathi film, which is again a film which is fabulous. It's about two young men and the relationship that they have, which is hardly ever seen in Indian cinema. There was Humans in the Loop, Aranya Sahai's film, which is about, the combination of two completely radically different elements like the tribals and AI, artificial intelligence, and how the two meld. There was also Dhadak Part 2, which is also a Dharma film about caste and class. And so was Homebound, about caste, class, and religion, the hot button issues that India should be talking more about. We all should be engaged with much more. These are the films that are actually talking about the real issues. And these are the films that we need to be seeing more of in theaters rather than these films actually having to struggle for space. Kanu Behel's Titli, which is again a really interesting, like a dive into a young man and small town and the masculinities and the insecurities that the film is dealing with, again had to struggle with the numbers of shows that it got. Before I forget, it was also Jugnuma, Ram Reddy's film, which had Manoj Bajpayee in it, which is absolutely one of my favorite films of the year. Again, didn't get the kind of play that it should have. So I think that's also something that exhibitors are now struggling with. What are the films that people will come to, or what will they wait for 3 weeks, 4 weeks for the film to drop on a streaming platform? So this dichotomy that has started to happen and has intensified during the pandemic is something that the movies all over the world, I mean, filmmakers all over the world are now struggling with this conundrum.
But do you think that OTT has changed that? As in, even if people don't essentially go to the theater, they still have a chance to sort of discover such films and watch them on streaming platforms?
So while I do agree, yes, of course, that these films are now going to be available for, if we couldn't see them in theaters, we'll of course see them on this platform. But the whole idea of experiencing as it should be in a larger space, communal viewing, all of that, that magic. If you need that magic, then you need for this some kind of a understanding that this is not this and this. Well, cinema is cinema, and
Yes.
that's what it should be. Yeah.
And talking about OTT, one genre that Indian creators keep on returning to is the crime thriller or murder mystery. And that was true for this year as well, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was no doubt in anybody's head that the first thing that people would watch in January of 2025 was Patal Lok 2. The second part of Patal Lok, which came 5 years later, and people had been waiting for the show, and it really didn't disappoint because, it just took the location away from Delhi to the Northeast, which is very clearly the go-to place for all for the big shows this year. I mean, apart from the Patal Lok, there was also Family Man, which went off to the Northeast to get its jollies along over there. So, yes, crime thrillers, murder mysteries, all of these are easier to do than anything else because it has a ready-made template. It has action, it has the villain, it has the bad guy, it has the good guy. It has the tropes that we already know. So I think these are the themes that OTT has explored and done really well with. I would say, though, that some of my favorite OTT shows which were not made in India was, I think, Adolescence was my number one show, which was a Netflix UK show, which again, it is sort of about crime, but it's also about much more. It's about the killing of a young girl, but it's about, when the layers start getting unraveled, it is about society, it's about gender roles, it's about how young men as young as 13 and 12 are looking at themselves. It's about how a social media is shaping the way we are and the way we behave and all of those consequences the show took in so beautifully. Then I really like The Studio, which is about, the Hollywood. It's about, it goes behind the scenes, like a BTS in behind all the creation of cinema in Hollywood. Then I also really like Slow Horses, which is a Mick Herron. Again, it has all these spies, but these are not spies who are like James Bond. These are spies who are sitting around in a small little, in a hole in the wall building and wondering what to do with their lives. Very nicely done. So these were some of the shows which were not Indian, which I really enjoyed. Then it makes you wonder why a show like Adolescence is not possible here, or is it possible? Can we do something which goes into, just doesn't stay at skimming the surface, which goes underneath and which tries to delve into real lives and to see, how we are mediating, how social media is mediating between the lives that we live and the lives that we want other people to see.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, social media on one hand is full of conversations around spotting the green flag or appreciating the man who is in touch with his feminine side. But again, on the other side, we see shows like Adolescence explore what can happen when young people drift towards the darker corners of the internet and how it can shape a young mind.
Oh, absolutely. You know, what you've just said is so on the point as far as the impact of what we are watching all the time. And I'm now wondering, there was a time when people would say that you are what you eat. I think now we are what we watch. And the distinction between what is real and what is not real in a young person's mind, which is unformed, which is doesn't really have tools to really understand how to distinguish between what is right and what is not, is something that should concern all of us.
And when you talk about OTT, one show that really made waves was Aryan Khan's directorial debut, The Bads of Bollywood, which offers a sharp take on how Bollywood works and, the kind of politics that goes on behind the scenes. What did you make of the series?
Okay, I have to say that I expected a little more substance from the show and something that would take me out of the zone that I'd already seen in, let's say, Om Shanti Om and also Luck by Chance. I think the superstructure on which Aryan Khan's debut was built is something that we'd already seen. And that was my first off the top reaction when I watched the show back to back, obviously, when it dropped on Netflix, was that, okay, we've seen this mother who's movie mad mother. We've seen these people, we've seen the kind of games that people play behind the scenes in Farah Khan's film. We've also seen the fun aspect of it and the kind of melodramatic aspect of it in Om Shanti Om. So what is Aryan Khan giving me that I haven't seen before? So to me, the cheekiest part of the show, which I think a lot of people cleave towards, was the way it sends up the people or the people who went after Aryan and the consequent Shah Rukh Khan and the semi-fictional people who showed up and said, drugs kahan hai, mujhe drugs do. That was fun.
Yes,
But I
yes.
thought literally it could have been better in so very many ways. And I really thought that it could have been called Who's Your Daddy? Which I think which I think really should have been the title of the show. It was fun, it was frothy, but yeah, and to add just a little something, what I think was the most important part of it, which I think should have been perhaps played up a little more, is that it touches upon the syncretic nature of Bollywood, where religious divide still hasn't sort of ruined the industry completely, where talent and luck, what truly counts for your being from here to here. So I'm looking forward to what Aryan Khan does next. But this was a good, well, let's say, an okay beginning. We're hoping for something more.
Right. And Shubhra, we've talked about both films and TV shows. Are there any others we haven't touched upon yet that really stood out for you?
So I really also enjoyed Stephen King's the series that came again. It's called Welcome to Derry. It's one of the many iterations of his most popular. I literally, the book that I love so much is called. It is about an entity which is malevolent, which eats up kids. And I don't know whether this is a spoiler for people who haven't read it, but the book has been in existence for so many years. So I guess it's not. But what this series does, again, it is something really interesting. It goes back into the 50s and 60s and it comes up to the 80s. It shows the kind of way that people were using race, using what women can do and what they are allowed to do, and what the fear of the outsider. They've contemporized the telling in a way that it hits all the essential themes that we are talking about in 2025. And the film that really will stay with me, I think, for a long time, is possibly, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, many people who've seen it, is the film. It's called The Voice of Hind Rajab, which is being directed by the Tunisian filmmaker Kauthar Benhania, who also had done this lovely film called Four Daughters. She heard this little clip which was on social media, which had gone completely viral. The voice of a 5-year-old girl who says that her name is Hind Rajab, and the voice comes through the speakers and into the earpieces of International Rescue Office, which is listening out for people. And it says, "Help me, I'm alone in the car." And it turns out that this is a car that has been fired at by Israeli tanks. And it is a Palestinian family, an aunt and uncle and cousins. And this little girl is the only one that is left alive in the car. And this whole film is about how this group of people who are sitting in this office try and put together a rescue team to get into this Gaza Strip where this car is, like, it is in one corner, which they have managed to pinpoint the location. But this, they, for a variety of reasons, where it is a bureaucracy kicks in, that you need to take permissions, where the safety aspect of the rescue team kicks in, where they are worried about what will happen to the people who go in the rescue car, the ambulance, to go in for and to get this little girl out of this conflict zone. I have not experienced a film like this, because in this one, you're also melding fact and fiction. You are creating a rescue office which is not real, but you're taking the voice of this little girl, which is real, which is the 5-year-old who is in this car, who is so scared. Her family is all dead. She doesn't know it yet. She doesn't know possibly the meaning of death. And the impact of that film sitting in a theater in Jeddah, I just saw the film a couple of weeks ago at the Red Sea Film Festival, and I still haven't managed to put it past me. I don't think I ever will. So I just wanted to mention that as one of the most impactful cinematic experiences of 2025.
And here's hoping that the film reaches an even wider audience so more people in India can get to watch it. But Shubhra, now if we look ahead to 2026, we already know that Dhurandhar Part 2 is something that people are looking forward to. What else are you excited to see in the year ahead?
So I think, again, 2026 looks like, I mean, from what I know, is it's going to be more Part 2s and Part 3s, sequels and franchise extensions. But one film that is a franchise extension but is fronted by a female is Alpha, Alia Bhatt's Alpha. I'm looking forward to it because it gives her a role that she herself confessedly is excited about. And it's also given me a spy, going back to a spy universe, which is less, let's say, jingoistic than the one that really took over this last part of the year. I'm also looking forward to 21, which is Sriram Raghavan's film, which has Dharmendra in his last role, which is supposed to be out this week, but it has been pushed to early, I think, the first week of Jan, in fact, which is about a war hero. Again, it is about war, it's about battles, but it's about the real thing without giving us this mixer of real and not real, which is, so I'm looking forward to 21, let's say Alpha, let's say maybe a Mirzapur Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. This year was really a waste of my time. I'm wondering what they will do in a film, Taleen Bhaiya and gang. So yeah, that one possibly may be worth my while. But you know what? I really actually don't do this kind of looking ahead, because to me, as a long-time film critic, I'm always looking for films to surprise me. So I don't really like to know more about any film at all. I like my Fridays to be pristine. I like going in tabula rasa. I like going in without knowing too much. So I want the year to surprise me in good ways. So let's see where it goes from here.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.